Welcome back. Those that are regulars here, and those that are familiar faces here, and then those that we get to meet for the first time that are here too, and others who I may not know about yet. We're going to be in the book of Job. If there's a Bible around and you want to follow along, we'll be in the book of Job all morning. Book of Job. So let's be thinking about this question of why do we suffer? Whether it's a room with one person in it or a room of thousands, it's a question that strikes our life at different times and in different ways. So let's come to Job, see what this book has to say to us. A lot of discussion about when Job was written. Some say it's the oldest book. Some say, no, it was written much later in the exile, two very different time frames, but neither side negates the message of the book. Similarly, there's discussions about whether Job is historical, whether there was an actual character named Job, a person, or whether that's more of an allegory for other things as the book unfolds. But again, neither side negates the message. The main characters as we come to Job, of course we have Job, we have God, we have Satan, or as the Hebrew would help us see, the adversary, the accuser. We have it as capital S, Satan, and it won't change our discussion any. We have a few of Job's buddies, if you will, as a part of this conversation. It opens with blessing. The book will open with blessing, but it quickly moves to disaster. Job's in good shape in many ways as the story opens. Chapter 1, beginning in verse 1. In the land of Uz there lived a man whose name was Job. This man was blameless and upright. He feared God and shunned evil. He had 7 sons and 3 daughters, and he owned 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, and 500 donkeys. And he had a large number of servants. He was the greatest man among all the people of the East. Job was blessed. Think also the idea of fortunate. Not fortunate as in, hey, he just had good luck, but no, fortunate. He was just fortunate in what he had. Good fortune was definitely his. Blessed or fortunate with his family. We see that with many sons, many daughters. He's blessed or fortunate in his work and his possessions. It's seen in what he owns. He has a pretty good portfolio. Great. Great is the word that's used to describe this man named Job. He was also blessed in his relationship with God. This is seen in the next couple of verses. Verse 4, his sons used to hold feasts in their homes on their birthdays, and they would invite their 3 sisters to eat and drink with them. When a period of feasting had run its course, Job would make arrangements for them to be purified. Early in the morning, he would sacrifice a burnt offering for each of them, thinking, perhaps my children have sinned and cursed God in their hearts. This was Job's regular custom. He did all he could to find himself right before God. He even took his children's actions. What his children did, he took those to heart before God. What a parent. From the land of Uz, though, we quickly move to the land of God. From this realm of the scene that's just been described, we find ourselves whisked away to a land that we can't see. It's a place where the Lord, where the angels, where Satan, the accuser, all interact. Explain more? We don't need to. What we do need to do is listen to what's going on there. Verse 6. One day the angels came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came with them. The Lord said to Satan, where have you come from? Satan answered the Lord, from roaming throughout the earth, going back and forth on it. Then the Lord said to Satan, have you considered my servant Job? There's no one on earth like him. He's blameless and upright, a man who fears God and shuns evil. Does Job fear God for nothing? Satan replied. Have you not put a hedge around him and his household and everything he has? You have blessed the work of his hands so that his flocks and herds are spread throughout the land. Stretch out your hand and strike everything he has, and he'll surely curse you to your face. The Lord said to Satan, very well then, everything he has is in your power, but on the man himself do not lay a finger. Then Satan went out from the presence of the Lord. What does all that mean? Well, it means problems for Job. Verse 13. One day when Job's sons and daughters were feasting and drinking wine at the oldest brother's house, a messenger came to Job and said, the oxen were plowing and the donkeys were grazing nearby, and the Sabaeans attacked and made off with them. They put the servants to the sword, and I'm the only one who has escaped to tell you. While he was still speaking, another messenger came and said, the fire of God fell from the heavens and burned up the sheep and the servants, and I'm the only one who has escaped to tell you. While he was still speaking, another messenger came and said, the Chaldeans formed 3 raiding parties and swept down on your camels and made off with them. They put the servants to the sword, and I'm the only one who has escaped to tell you. While he was still speaking, yet another messenger came and said, your sons and daughters were feasting and drinking wine at the oldest brother's house, when suddenly a mighty wind swept in from the desert and struck the 4 corners of the house. It collapsed on them, and they are dead. And I am the only one who has escaped to tell you. Chapter 2 tells of the suffering increasing as Satan inflicts Job with what's described as painful sores from the sole of his feet to the crown of his head. Why? All we know is verses 4 through 6. Skin for skin, Satan replied. A man will give all he has for his own life, but now stretch out your hand and strike his flesh and bones, and he will surely curse you to your face. The Lord said to Satan, very well then, he's in your hands, but you must spare his life. The next person we hear from is Job's wife. She speaks next, verse 9. His wife said to him, are you still maintaining your integrity? Curse God and die. He replied, you're talking like a foolish woman. Shall we accept good from God and not trouble? In all this, Job did not sin in what he said. Job's wife confirms what we're often thinking. It's our fault that things are bad, so we may as well just finish it off. If that sounds harsh, though, listen to Job's buddies. They start talking next. Eliphaz will go first. It's in chapter 4. We'll just read some excerpts of what these different friends are saying. They say much more, but we'll get the gist of what each of them are saying. Eliphaz goes first in chapter 4, verse 7. Eliphaz speaks to Job. Consider now, who, being innocent, has ever perished? Where were the upright ever destroyed? As I have observed, those who plow evil and those who sow trouble reap it. Job, when you do bad things will happen, is what he's saying. And Eliphaz continues on into chapter 5, verse 17. Blessed is the one whom God corrects. So do not despise the discipline of the Almighty, for he wounds, but he also binds up. He injures, but his hands also heal. God's done this, so be thankful, Job, Eliphaz says. It's from the hand of God, so just be grateful that he's done it. Job responds, I haven't done anything wrong. Chapter 6, verse 24. Job says, teach me and I'll be quiet. Show me where I've been wrong. How painful are honest words, but what do your arguments prove? Do you mean to correct what I say and treat my desperate words as wind? You would even cast lots for the fatherless and barter away your friend. But now be so kind as to look at me. Would I lie to your face? Relent. Do not be unjust. Reconsider, for my integrity is at stake. Is there any wickedness on my lips? Can my mouth not discern malice? Eliphaz, I haven't done anything wrong. Buddy Bildad will speak next. Another friend who's standing here. Chapter 8. Bildad will step in. If at any point you think, I'm not going to turn any more pages, Mark, you don't have to. You can just listen. Otherwise, I'll just continue to say where I'm at so you know. Chapter 8, verse 2. Bildad will speak next. Another one of the friends who's listening to the interchange. How long will you say such things, Job? Your words are a blustering wind. Does God pervert justice? Does the Almighty pervert what is right? When your children sinned against him, he gave them over to the penalty of their sin. Wow. But if you will seek God earnestly and plead with the Almighty, if you are pure and upright, even now, he will rouse himself on your behalf and restore you to your prosperous state. Bildad says, God doesn't make mistakes. If you're having bad things happen to you, it's because you've done bad things. Job responds in chapter 9. We have to get to chapter 9 because Bildad's going to continue to talk through chapter 8. Chapter 9, verse 32, we hear some of Job's response back. Verse 32, he's not a mere mortal like me that I might answer him, that we might confront each other in court. If there were only someone to mediate between us, someone to bring us together, someone to remove God's rod from me so that his terror would frighten me no more, then I would speak up without fear of him. But as it now stands with me, I cannot. Okay, Bildad, this is from God. But I just wish I could reason with God. Buddy Zophar, third friend, he's been listening in. Now it's his turn to talk. Chapter 11, he starts out. Maybe finally somebody will bring something to this conversation. Zophar says, are all these words to go unanswered? Is this talker, Job, to be vindicated? Will your idle talk reduce others to silence? Will no one rebuke you when you mock? You say to God, my beliefs are flawless and I'm pure in your sight. Oh, how I wish God would speak, that he would open his lips against you and disclose to you the secrets of wisdom, for true wisdom has two sides. Know this, Job, God has even forgotten some of your sin. What friends? Zophar, he does seem to recognize how great God is, but, verse 13, yet if you devote your heart to him, and you stretch out your hands to him, and if you put away the sin that is in your hand, and allow no evil to dwell in your tent, then, free of fault, you will lift up your face, and you will stand firm without fear. With Job's wife and the others, they're convinced that bad things happen to bad people and good things happen to good people. We've just read a little bit, but we can figure that out, and it's only clearer as we continue to read more of that. In thick books, it's called retribution theology. It's a theology and thinking about God and the way things are, and then retribution, getting back, getting things right, getting things balanced out. It means that if you're good, then good things happen, and if you're bad, then bad things happen. Retribution theology. From a human point of view, they're saying that's how things work. But retribution theology has a problem, though. Before God, none of us measure up. Compared to God, we're all bad. Yet, good things still happen in our world and in our lives. From the human point of view, that's how it works. Good for good, bad for bad. But from heaven's point of view, that's not quite right. Remember what God called Job? It's back at the beginning. Have you considered my servant Job? There's no one on earth like him. He is blameless and he's upright. A man who fears God and shuns evil. He's called that twice, once in chapter 1, once in chapter 2. Job's a good man with bad things happening to him, and then bad advice being given to him. He speaks again in chapter 13. He says, my eyes have seen all this. My ears have heard and understood it. What you know, I also know. I'm not inferior to you. But I desire to speak to the Almighty and to argue my case with God. You, however, smear me with lies. You're all worthless physicians, all of you. If only you would be altogether silent. For you, that would be wisdom. Again, Job says he would like to meet God and plead his case. Talk about what's going on in his life. Even though he knows God is great, he still thinks God needs to explain all that's happening to him. Explain all that Job has lost. He's lost his family. He's lost his possessions. He's lost his health. Everything is gone. These are the questions that you have, and these are the questions that I have. You may have count of your children, but you wonder if God has them. You may know how many there are and where they are, but you wonder if they have God. You may have sores on your body like Job did, and like him, you really don't know why. You may have lost all that you used to have. Then there's the storms of job troubles and car troubles and people troubles, and they've caved in the roof over your head. You may have been attacked by bills, or by doubt, or by raiders. Maybe raiders from the past that have come back, and now they're attacking you again, and you don't know why. And it's tempting to buy into the thinking of Job's friends. We often say, so-and-so, they had it coming. Retribution theology. It was only a matter of time. I knew it. It was only a matter of time. Retribution theology. Bad things happen to bad people. Good things happen to good people. Sometimes it's true. Sometimes jail sentences are served because a crime was committed. Sometimes fines are paid because speed limits are broken. Sometimes jobs are lost because rules weren't followed. Sometimes bad things do happen because of other bad things. We know that up front. If you touch a hot pan, you get burned. That's not retribution theology, that's cause and effect. That's life in the kitchen. But what about life at the hospital? What about life in the back of the ambulance? What do we do with life at the hands of the funeral director? Even if you touch someone else's life, you can get burned. And you're not even involved with it. What kind of theology is that? What kind of God is that? Job's friends said, God only does bad things if you do. Job said, I haven't done anything bad enough to merit this kind of treatment. And if I could talk to God, I would tell him that. I just want to be able to talk with him. So the book of Job continues to revolve around Job and his friends stating and restating their case. It turns more into, I'm right, no, I'm right, no, listen, I'm right, no, I'm right. Eliphaz, he plays the age card. Chapter 15, it's in verse 7. He says, are you the first man ever born? Were you brought forth from the hills, Job? Do you listen in on God's counsel? Do you have a monopoly on wisdom? What do you know that we do not know? What insights do you have that we do not have? The gray-haired and the aged are on our side, men even older than your father. You can hear him almost putting Job in his place. Listen, Sonny, I've been down the road. You don't know what you're talking about. I'm older, you're younger, Job. I'm right, you're wrong. Job speaks in chapter 16. Then Job replied, I've heard many things like these. You are miserable comforters, all of you. Will your long-winded speeches never end? What ails you that you keep on arguing? I also could speak like you if you were in my place. I could make fine speeches against you and shake my head at you, but my mouth would encourage you. Comfort from my lips would bring you relief. If roles could be reversed, Job says, I'd be telling you things that would build you up, not tear you down. Bildad steps back in chapter 18. Bildad, we heard from him earlier. Bildad says in verse 2, when will you end these speeches? Be sensible, and then we can talk. Why are we regarded as cattle? You can just see the three of them standing around him. Why are we regarded as cattle and considered stupid in your sight? You who tear yourself to pieces in your anger, is the earth to be abandoned for your sake, or must the rocks be moved out of their place? The lamp of a wicked man is snuffed out. Bad things happen to bad people, Job. The flame of his fire stops burning. The light in his tent becomes dark. The lamp beside him goes out. The vigor of his step is weakened. His own schemes throw him down. And he keeps on going. Bad things only happen to bad people, Job. Figure that out, get it right with God, and then good things will happen. They go back and forth debating God's role in people's lives and the roles of wickedness in the world. Finally, Job does what you and I have done. In the middle of suffering, we let God know what we've done right. God, I've been at church the last 8 Sundays in a row. That one before I was sick, we can't count that, but it's going good. 8 Sundays in a row I've been there. God, right now I know where my Bible's at. Just letting you know this is the good things that are going on. God, I married a faithful man or a faithful woman. Lord, I didn't take that drink or that drag. Lord, I went all week. I went to this point in the week and I haven't, whatever it is. God, this is what I've done. So to Job, he lays out all that he's done right. Go to chapter 31. Chapter 31. I know you're lucky. We took a big jump there. You're like, whew. Chapter 31. Job said, I made a covenant with my eyes not to look lustfully at a young woman. For what is our lot from God above, our heritage from the Almighty on high? Is it not ruin for the wicked, disaster for those who do wrong? Does he not see my ways and count my every step? If I've walked in falsehood, or my foot has hurried after deceit, let God weigh me in honest scales, and He will know that I'm blameless. If my steps have turned from the path, if my heart has been led by my eyes, or if my hands have been defiled, then may others eat what I have sown, and may my crops be uprooted. And he says even more before the chapter closes with, the words of Job are ended. It's then that a new voice is heard. Out of the three that have been talking, now there's another voice that's heard, that of Elihu. He knew he was the youngest of the crowd, whether he was there from the beginning, whether he just walks in. He knows he's the youngest. He didn't want to speak out of turn. Finally, a voice of reason. Eliphaz, Bildad, Zophar, they say Job has done a bunch of things he's not telling us. That's why he's suffering. Job's saying he hasn't done all the bad things that deserve everything that he's lost. Elihu, help us out. Chapter 32. Let's go to verse 6. It reminds us of his age. Elihu says, I'm young in years and you're old. Not always what you want to hear, but in this situation it's good. That's why I was fearful, not daring to tell you what I know. I thought age should speak, advanced years should teach wisdom. But it's the Spirit in a person, the breath of the Almighty that gives them understanding. It's not only the old who are wise, not only the aged who understand what is right. He's doing really well. Therefore I say, listen to me. I too will tell you what I know. I waited while you spoke. I listened to your reasoning while you were searching for words. I gave you my full attention. But not one of you has proved Job wrong. None of you has answered his arguments. Okay, keep going. Verse 5. Look, chapter 34. Chapter 34. Go to verse 5. Job says, I'm innocent, but God denies me justice. Although I'm right, I'm considered a liar. Although I'm guiltless, his arrows inflict an incurable wound. Is there anyone like Job who drinks scorn like water? He keeps company with evildoers. He associates with the wicked, for he says there is no profit in trying to please God. Elihu's starting to sound like the others. So listen to me, you men of understanding. Far be it from God to do evil, from the Almighty to do wrong. He repays everyone for what they have done. He brings on them what their conduct deserves. It's unthinkable that God would do wrong, that the Almighty would pervert justice. He's saying just what the others were saying. Elihu is saying that God makes bad things happen because people do bad things. Suffering means you've done something wrong, Job. He goes on to make it clear for several more minutes. One man's suffering, a circle of 3 friends, and another quiet guy who finally feels he has to speak up, and he says the exact same thing the others have been saying, and then it happens. Enough! Enough! God's the next one to speak. It's chapter 38. Then the Lord spoke to Job out of the storm. He said, "Who is this that obscures my plans with words without knowledge? Brace yourself like a man, I'll question you. You shall answer me. Where were you when I laid the earth's foundation? Tell me if you understand. Who marked off its dimensions? Surely you know. Who stretched a measuring line across it? On what were its footings set? Or who laid its cornerstone? While the morning stars sang together and all the angels shouted for joy, who shut up the sea behind doors when it burst forth from the womb, when I made the clouds its garment and wrapped it in thick darkness? When I fixed limits for it and set its doors and bars in place, when I said, this far you may come and no farther, here is where your proud waves halt. Have you ever given orders to the morning or shown the dawn its place? That it might take the earth by the edges and shake the wicked out of it? God continues through chapter 39. He goes into chapter 40, where it starts, verse 2. Will the one who contends with the Almighty correct him? Let him who accuses God answer him. And then Job answered the Lord. I don't think I could probably read this as quiet as he would read it, because I want you to hear it. I am unworthy. How can I reply to you? I put my hand over my mouth. I spoke once, but I have no answer. Twice, I will say no more. Then the Lord spoke to Job out of the storm. Brace yourself like a man. I will question you. You will answer me. Would you discredit my justice? Would you condemn me to justify yourself? Do you have an arm like God's, and can your voice thunder like His? Then adorn yourself with glory and splendor and clothe yourself in honor and majesty. Unleash the fury of your wrath. Look at all who are proud and bring them low. Look at all who are proud and humble them. Crush the wicked where they stand. Bury them all in the dust together. Shroud their faces in the grave. Then I myself will admit to you that your own right hand can save you. Whew. Going back to all that is seen in nature, God's questions continue throughout chapters 40 and 41. Questions that we can read in the midst of our own suffering. Questions that we would do good to read as we think about what's going on in our world. Go back to those questions of 40 and 41. As the book closes, Job quietly responds again to God. In chapter 42 and verse 1, then Job replied to the Lord, I know that you can do all things. No purpose of yours can be thwarted. You ask, who is it that obscures my plans without knowledge? Surely I spoke of things I didn't understand, things too wonderful for me to know. You said, listen now and I will speak. I will question you and you shall answer me. My ears have heard you, but now my eyes have seen you. Therefore, I despise myself and repent in dust and ashes. Amen. Job found out he was trying to understand things that he would never, ever be able to comprehend. Job's friends, God talks to them next. Verse 7. After the Lord had said these things to Job, he said to Eliphaz the Temanite, I'm angry with you and your two friends because you've not spoken the truth about me, as my servant Job has. So now take 7 bulls and 7 rams and go to my servant Job and sacrifice a burnt offering for yourselves. My servant Job will pray for you, and I will accept his prayer and not deal with you according to your folly. You have not spoken the truth about me as my servant Job has. So Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamathite did what the Lord told them, and the Lord accepted Job's prayer. I'd love to see that play out. If this was a TV special, this is a scene I want to see. Finally, God steps in, squares these 3 away. I'm not going to do what your deeds deserve. What you've said is how it is. I'm not going to do. It looks like God's okay with our questions. God's okay with our questions. He would rather have our questions about how things are than our explanations about how things should be. God would rather have our questions about how things are than our explanations about how things should be. At the very end, Job ends up with 7 more sons, 3 more daughters, and in livestock, twice as much as he had before. So why do we suffer? Well, according to that, so we can be doubly blessed at the end? Is that what it's about? No. So we can pray for those that are trying to help us? That's where it ends up. Job ends up praying for those that were trying to help him, and it's almost a twist in the story. Is that why? Maybe it's so we can be put in our place by God. We suffer so he can put us in our place. Is that what the book of Job tells us? Whatever we learn from Job, whatever we come away from this book with, we have to do it in harmony with suffering throughout the rest of the Bible. It can't be where Job teaches this lesson and the other books teach these lessons. No, it all has to fit together. Whatever we learn in Job, it's going to have to match what Jesus and the blind man teach in John chapter 9. You can read that story later. There we find that suffering can happen so God gets the glory. Whatever we learn in Job, it's going to have to match what Paul said he learned in 2 Corinthians 12. There we find out that suffering happens so we don't get the glory that really belongs to God. So what do we learn in Job? Why is it that we suffer? We don't always know. We don't always know. When we can answer all these other questions that God has, and he poses a lot of them, when we can answer those, he'll answer ours. When we can get all of the inner workings of nature, then we'll understand the complexities of our own lives and relationships. Why do we suffer? We don't always know. That doesn't leave us empty-handed, though. There's still some things we learn in Job, some other things that we can know with absolute certainty. Know where the permission for suffering comes from. Know where the permission from suffering comes from. We learned it early on, and we get it all the way through. It comes from God. The permission for suffering comes from God. Know who is in control. Same answer. God. God is the one that's in control. And know that God doesn't punish for questions. Know that there's no punishment there for the questioning. Job's trying to figure all this out. He asked plenty of them. So have you, and so have I, especially the ones that begin with why. We can also know that your response to suffering matters. Your response to suffering. Ask Job if it matters. Ask this blind man that was with Jesus if it matters. Ask Paul if it matters. When things aren't right in your world, in your life, does your response to it matter? And Job and the blind man and Paul would all say yes, it matters. retribution theology. Good for good, bad for bad. It's black and white. But it doesn't allow for this wide range of human actions and intentions. If we want bad for bad, if that's really what we're after, what do you do when you're a good person who accidentally makes a bad choice? What do we do then? And if we want good for good, how much good should flow before it's considered enough? That's enough. But instead of scales weighted with black and white, we live in a world of vivid color. We have the red of blood, which in the right setting is the blood of death. But in another setting, the red is the blood that gives life. There's the blue of the sky, and we look out, and the sky is blue, and there's also that feeling of, you don't look like you're feeling well. I'm just kind of, what color? Blue today. There's the green of nature. There's also the green of decay and rot. A life mixed with all that God made and allows, and that's a life in which we live. It doesn't explain the suffering, but sometimes seeing it that well can make life bearable and colorful. There's the yellow of sickness, but then there's the yellow of the sun. There's the brown of dirt as a loved one is buried. But then there's that brown of dirt as a garden starts to come to life. There's still right, there's still wrong, and there are still consequences. But there's also choice. Choices of our own and choices made by others. Things we can control and things we can't control. And that's the color of our lives and the world that we live in. Some suffering seems to make us stronger. Some suffering seems to shake us to the brink. Some is of little consequence. Some is of grave consequence. One Old Testament scholar says the book of Job doesn't defend God's justice, but it does defend God's wisdom. The book of Job doesn't defend God's justice, it does defend God's wisdom. It's this wisdom of God that will see you through whatever it is that you're going through. It won't prove you to be a bad person because bad things are happening, but it will prove you to be faithful as you stand up to what's going on. It's this wisdom of God that will see justice served in God's ways and not our ways. It's not about keeping track of right and wrong and then trying to grade in life accordingly. It's not about you being better so that you should suffer less, and it's not about someone else, they're worse so they should suffer more. No. It's about mercy. It's about God sparing us from what we all ultimately deserve. It's about grace. God giving us so much more than we deserve. It's about you letting God be God and about you being faithful. And it's about me letting God being God and me being faithful. Why do we suffer? We don't always know. What we can know is where the permission from suffering comes from. And it comes from God. He's consented to it somehow, and we don't always know why. And we can know that God is in control. We can always know who is in control, and it's God. And we can know that God doesn't punish for questions. Take your questions to God. He would much rather have our questions about how things are than our explanation of how things should be. And we can know that our response to suffering, it matters. Ask Job, ask a blind man, ask Paul. Finally, we can know that we must be faithful. We don't understand the other whys. We don't have answers to the other questions. And no matter what the circle around us would say, we must be faithful. And Job replied to the Lord, I know that you can do all things. No purpose of yours can be thwarted. You ask, who is it that obscures my plans without knowledge? Surely I spoke of things I did not understand, things too wonderful for me to know. You said, listen now, and I will speak. I will question you, and you shall answer me. My ears had heard of you, but now my eyes have seen you. Therefore, I despise myself and repent in dust and ashes. God calls to you this morning as a father who suffered the death of a son. And God calls to you this morning as a son who suffered death on a cross. He understands. He understands the colorful world that we live in. And He calls on you to follow Him no matter what. And even when you don't know the whys. His promise is not explanation, but faithfulness. He will be faithful to you. Will you be to Him, even as you suffer? David.
Amen.